Okay, thank you for the introduction. And as Umbreen has said, that I'm Alan Langford. I'm at the other university across the road. And before I joined Northumbria University, I was a forensic scientist. And you might have gathered by my accent, I'm not a Geordie. I am from north of the border, where, and I'm even in short sleeves as well. This weather doesn't affect me. What we are going to be talking about today is an introduction to forensic science. And we'll do it as a general introduction as well. So we'll tell you a little bit about what forensic science is. Or rather, you're going to tell me, which is why you've got your clickers. This is a test, and we start now. It's not really a test. Just a quick introduction to your clickers. I will let you know when you need to answer a question. It's either going to be question 1, 2, 3, or 4. It might be answered A, B, C, D. So you only need to press the button once. I will also give you an indication because sometimes the questions will require you to add in different answers as well on the same question. So we'll point those out as we go along. So the first question is going to be a really, really, really hard question, I'm afraid. So are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Good stuff. Right, here we go. Really difficult question. Hopefully you'll know the answer. And we're counting. Okay. Has everybody answered the question? Everybody sure they've got the question right? Okay. So, this is us. So, just over half of us are boys. Woohoo! We win. Sorry. Okay. Next question. Now you're so used to the buttons. I've got another question coming up. So, what do you think forensic science is? Is it biology and chemistry? Is it biology and chemistry used for court purposes? Is it any science? Or is it any science used for court purposes? Don't worry, I will tell you the answer as well. Let's have a look, counter. Okay. So we're nearly there. We're nearly there. Anybody not click the button? Okay. So let's have a look at the responses. Those of you who said it's any science used for court purposes, you get a round of applause. Well done, because that is the right one. Okay. So, forensic science, where does it come from? The word of forensic comes from the Latin of forensis, means of or belonging to the forum. And traditionally it was biology and chemistry which was put forward. These days, though, is much more wide-ranging. And certainly, anybody got a smartphone? Yeah? So, I've got a smartphone, but that's also allowed us to move on as well and think about different crimes which would be available and different types of evidence. So digital evidence is also really important these days. So that doesn't really come under your biology or your chemistry. So it's now become much more encompassing. So forensic science is literally any science. Could be insects, could be archaeology, could be anthropology, so looking at the study of bones. It could be looking at ancient remains. It still becomes of forensis, meaning bringing it forward to the forum. What makes it in our context is it will go into court. So to get the likes of me, who was a forensic scientist, I'd look at some stuff, and then I'd go to court and I'd tell them what I think that stuff means. Okay? So it's any science these days. give you a little bit of history about forensic science as well. I'll not sort of dwell on it too much, but you can see that we've gone right back into pre-700 BC. So if I put that down, what is that? Anybody got an idea what that is? Fingerprint. Every single one of us has got a fingerprint. But in pre-700 BC, in Babylon, they used to use the fingerprints for being pushed onto some clay as a record of a transaction between two individuals. If we then think about fingerprints, well, fingerprints are really important in the context of criminal investigations and identifying an individual, but it wasn't until 1901 when Scotland Yard was created with a new head that they started to use fingerprints as a form of identification. Look at us now. We're now in 2015. I had to think there. 2015, and if you're looking at the smartphones, if anybody is lucky enough to have an iPhone 6, I'm too poor to afford an iPhone 6, but we're now looking at fingerprints as a tool by which you can unlock that phone. So it's registering back to you. It's also being used or proposed to be used in bank tellers as well, so that you can use that as a mechanism of identifying who you are. Some more history, coming a little bit closer to where we are now, 1235, not really that close, is we have this thing here, which is a sickle. And this is the story about Sun Tzu, where a murder was committed in a village. And in the process of that investigation, back in that time, all the villagers had to put their sickles out into a field. And over the next few days, the flies started to appear, and they went to one particular sickle, and they could identify the murder weapon in that way. So it's now looking at the evidence which is on there. So a murder was committed, blood was shed, and that now results in us looking at blood patterns. We can reconstruct events associated with the blood patterns. What else can we get from blood? Go on. What do you think? Yeah. DNA, absolutely. So DNA is really important, but it wasn't until the mid-1980s, well before probably a lot of you were born, that it was used for the criminal purposes, for doing identification of an individual. This one here, 1786, coming a little bit forward in time, is a case where somebody was shot, and in the pistol which was found at the time, there was a little piece of paper all rolled up. And on the individual themselves, there was another bit of paper. Unrolling those bits of paper and putting them back together, they found that they had a physical match between the two of where it was ripped. In 1835, you know what this is? Bullets, absolutely. It's the first time that the marks associated on a bullet, once it had been fired from a gun, were able to be used to identify the weapon that was used. 1836, do we know what this is? Anybody doing chemistry? It's arsenic. Okay. This sort of brings back into what my background is. My background is toxicology and looking at drugs and looking at poisons. And arsenic, and the reason why I'm putting this one up on 1836 was prior to that time, you would not be able to detect arsenic. So we couldn't tell whether or not somebody was murdered through the poison of arsenic. James Marsh came up with a test, and that is now being used. So a brief potted history of forensic science. It's not new. The concepts aren't new. But it wasn't really until 1910 when Edmond Locard came up with a principle. And this principle still holds true. What are you all sat down on? Marvellous. How did you get into Newcastle today? Bus. Where did you sit on the bus? On a seat. So every contact leaves a trace. So just as you sat down in the seat on the bus, some of you have transferred onto the seat. Something from that seat has transferred onto you. You've come into here. You sat down on another seat. Some more transfer of information has been passed over onto these seats, and likewise coming back onto you. So every contact leaves a trace. This is the key principle of modern day forensic science. Okay, so what does a forensic scientist do? Somebody like me who was in the post, what would we do? Is it somebody who looks for evidence recovered from crime scenes or accidents? Is it a police officer who goes to the scene of a crime? Is it someone who locates, records, recovers potential evidence relating to an investigation? Or is it a doctor who performs medical examination of a person? What do you think? There could be more than one answer. We'll have to watch the time. Yeah. I probably want, we're trying to get this in to be done by 1:45. Then we can get a few minutes just to go through the. Okay, so let's see what the scores on the doors say. Fantastic. Because, guess what? Well done. Right, here's another question. Who's watched CSI? Is this why you know this? Okay. So, if we think about a forensic scientist, this is what I would have done for a day-to-day job. So part of my job would be going out to scenes. I could collect evidence myself, or I could instruct somebody else to go and say, right, I want that collected, and they would do that process. Most of my job, though, was spent in the laboratory, wearing a white coat, wearing my safety glasses, wearing my gloves, and doing the examination. Okay? So if we're looking at what the scientist's role is, it is examining the items and then assessing the work, which would be potentially undertaken by somebody else, or coming up with some sort of conclusion based on the information that I have been given. Okay, so I'm trying to work out what it actually means. Unfortunately, it's not like that. It's not like you see on the telly. I would love it to be. What is wrong with this? What do you think that's the immediate thing? And okay, yes, TV is sort of glamorized a little bit, but what is missing from this? Sterile environment. Kind of, yes. Certainly on the genetic side of things, absolutely. You need to have a sterile environment for your DNA. But fundamentally, what is missing in this as a context is PPE. What do I mean by PPE? Personal protective equipment. But what does that mean? That means what you're going to be wearing is going to protect you, but also protect the evidence, which is something that you're going to be collecting or potentially examining as well. So, another question for you. I'll give you a little clue here as well. Absolutely, it's a scene suit. It's huge. Okay, so what do you think a crime scene examiner, somebody who's going out to a crime scene, would have to take? Would they have to take everything? And again, this is a multiple choice answer, so off you go. Okay, we're just about there, so let's have a look and see what the scores are. Wow, pretty good. Okay, so going out for a crime scene. This one here, the lab coats and the safety glasses, as a forensic scientist, I wouldn't take them out to a crime scene, but I would be wearing them in the laboratory. Everything else, then I would take out. Sometimes you would have to take your wellies. More often than not, though, you get these lovely things, which are your overshoes. So these will just easily slip over your shoe. Aren't they attractive? So, one of the reasons why we want to do this, I should really take this off now, but I quite like it. One of the reasons why we do this is to prevent contamination. We don't want anything that we're going to be collecting from the crime scene to be contaminated by anything from us. Exactly as we just said, that you've come in on the bus, you've sat down, so some of the evidence will be moved on to you, you've come into here, more evidence comes on to you. You don't want to be transferring that into the crime scene itself. So it can happen during the criminal act in the first place. It can happen if you've got the paramedics or the medical attendants is going in. During that scene investigation, that shouldn't happen because we're going to be wearing our personal protective equipment. Could also happen during storage of the items before they're being examined, or how they've been transported from one crime scene into the laboratory, or from one crime scene to another crime scene and then into the laboratory. Could happen within the laboratory, or it could happen within the analysis that you do. So contamination is absolutely crucial. We have to make absolutely certain that it doesn't happen. If it does happen, then the case is going to be potentially jeopardized. So, right, I'm going to put the lights on for 2 seconds, well, a bit longer than 2 seconds. And I'm going to ask for, pick me, somebody from this side. First person to shout out. Right, there you go. And from this side, the first person, hands down, to put their left hand up. That'll be you then. If you come down to the front. Okay, so. Well done. What's your name?
Charlie.
We've got Charlie here and Catherine. Can we get a round of applause for Charlie and Catherine, please? So, Charlie and Catherine are now going to have a bit of a competition with each other.
Oh, yay.
Unfortunately, these are rather big. Well, we'll give it a go. So, what I want you to do, if you come over here. Okay, it's just on a zip. So, you have that. You're going to put this on, and you're going to put that on as well. What we've got is we have, you've seen suits, we've got face masks, we've got what's known as mob caps, which are little hair nets which will go over your head. We have some gloves, and we've got some overshoes. So, very, very quickly as you can, I want you to put full protective equipment on. Off you go. And don't fall over, please. It's not as easy as it looks. So who's voting for Catherine to win? Who's voting for Charlie to win? Who's voting for Catherine to win? If you open it out, it'll go over your head. So. Okay, just. There you go. Okay, Charlie reckons he's finished. Now, Charlie, you carry on, Catherine. Charlie, you come over here. Stand up on here. Now, who thinks Charlie is finished? Okay, what's he missing? You can have a seat in the chair if it's easier to put them on. They're a bit tight. They're on the bigger size. So, Charlie, come back in the middle. How you finding these are bigger?
Oh god, this is very concerning.
Okay. Is Charlie finished now? No. Was he not? Why not?
Because...
No, you're fine with the glasses.
Oh, right, okay then.
Do you understand here? Charlie finished? Okay. We've got some who say no and some who say yes. Difference of opinion.
Mr. Farrier, what have I done wrong?
Okay, Catherine, if you come in here as well. Okay, looking at our two lovely volunteers. Who would you vote for? Would you say that Catherine has done it correctly, or would you say that Charlie has done it correctly? Okay. Well, one of the problems, and when you're thinking about this, is one of the problems are these things. Okay?
They're very hard.
Well, they are. So gloves, if you're going to be wearing gloves, then they need to be tight-fitting. So the size of your hand is going to be the size of your gloves. But if you notice, I want to take your hood down for 2 secs. Good stuff. Okay, so Charlie got everything on reasonably quickly, but one of the first things he put on was these. So if you're putting these on, and you're touching up on here, what's coming onto your hands? Coming back to thinking about contamination, it's now come onto there, coming up and touching onto here. You're now going to be transferring stuff over. The other thing, which our lovely Catherine has got, so hair kicking out. So you want to get that tied up. How do you feel? Do you feel claustrophobic in there? Is it kind of really hot and getting really sweaty?
Not really hot, but...
You will be. You're wearing that for the rest of the night. I'm only joking, you're not really. So, it is. You put this on. They're absolutely huge as well.
My bottom looks big.
So one of the things that we're going to look, the other thing about your face mask as well. With a face mask, then there's an upper part and there's a lower part. And there's going to be a little metal strip just along so you can mold it against your nose. So if you are going to be breathing in and you're breathing down into your mask and then it comes back up again, it's just going to steam your glasses up. And given that I wear glasses, I want to be able to see what I'm doing. The other thing about your gloves, you want to wear 2 pairs because these can rip. And if they rip, you've only got 1 pair on, then you're back onto your single hands again. So if 1 pair rips, then you've still got another pair underneath. Can we get a round of applause for our lovely volunteers? Could you take your gloves off? I'll have them. Your mob cap, your scene suit, and your shoes as well. You're more than welcome to keep the face mask and the mob cap and the shoes, but I want the scene suits back. Likewise as well, if you two, they get sweeties. You can help yourself to it. I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to do this, but hey, if you're allowed sweeties, you can have a sweetie. Marvellous. Okay, so just as... What do I do with my... Where's my wee tooth gone? Yeah, I'll put it down somewhere. Okay, so just as they're taking the suits off, the suits are cumbersome, okay? And if you're in them, then you're going to be wearing them for potentially a long period of time, okay? But they are really, really, really important. That's the only way that we're going to protect you from the scene and the scene from you. So, another question, don't you two worry about this, just you carry on, is what else does a scientist do? Can they tell you, if you find blood, can they tell you where that blood has come from? Can they tell you what the activity is? Or can they tell you what the offence is? You just pop that down on the chair, that's fine. Thank you.
Can I keep this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can keep the hat too. Don't forget that you will be wearing it if you're getting on the bus. You get some funny looks. You usually take your shoes off beforehand. You alright? Your hand. There you go.
Hold on. There we go.
This is cotton, yeah. There you go.
Right.
Lovely. Cheers, Charlie. Okay, so the scientist can only tell you this one and this one. This one here, the offence, that is only in the court that can be decided. So the scientist does not address those, but they do address where it came from and how it got there, but not the offence. That's a court purpose. So, we're seeing Charlie and Catherine dressed up like this, and also like this, but to a large extent, that was me. Wearing attractive equipment and spending most of my time in the laboratory, not looking like this. However glamorous that was, we do have lights in the laboratories most of the time. Okay, so the next question is, who else do you think is involved? So who else do you think is involved? This isn't a question, this is just an open question, sorry. Who else do you think would be involved? Yeah. Who said police? Well done, absolutely. And at which point, I will introduce you to my colleague here. What do you think he does? Does he look like a policeman? Okay. I will introduce you, I'll let Tim introduce you to who he is and what he does, and we'll take on the next part of the little talk.
Hello everybody, okay? Did you enjoy the first bit? Yeah. Good, good. My name's Gordon Makepeace. I'm a detective inspector within major crime in Northumbria Police, and I look after everything that's forensic. So everything that Alan was talking about the laboratory and going to court, it's my department and my staff who will make sure that hopefully we get all the evidence to the lab, hopefully present it correctly, and hopefully get it to a court and convict anybody that's responsible. So, if there's been a crime committed, what do you think the police do? What do you think their main role is? You at the top? Yeah, if it's a murder, yeah. Go right for the serious one. Good lad. Anything else? You in the middle? What's that, sorry? Good, good. So, we found the body. We've also sort of found out who it is. What else do you think is the next stage? You in the middle? Yeah?
Would that, try and find a scene, to make sure, nobody gets in there?
Very, very good. Well done. The police have numerous sort of responsibilities, as you all know. When it comes to crime and investigating crime, we'll go to the second point first, because they've probably gone a little bit back to front. As has been rightly mentioned, we investigate incidents and allegations and collate evidence. So once we're talking about forensic evidence, what kind of evidence do you think we're going to find? You mentioned a scene, so what do you think we might find at a scene? Yeah? Yeah? Very good. No? One more? Yep. You like your murders, mine, don't you? Eh? Yeah, there's so much evidence that been cleared, and Alan's sort of hit a few of the points already. There can be fibres, when we're talking about sitting on the seat. There can be blood, we're talking about DNA. There can be a weapon. Alan was talking about the blue overshoes. You think we can get anything from footwear? You at the back? Well done. Footprints can be almost as conclusive as fingerprints. So that's why it's so important when the police attend the scene, or when the forensic people attend the scene, that we wear overshoes and we don't actually bring contamination into that scene. So we investigate, and the top one, powers to arrest, question, detain individuals. Anybody, do you think? Then we'll just pick somebody off the street? You look quite canny. We'll just pick this lady in the front. She was responsible for the murder. What do you think our goal is? What do you think we're trying to achieve? Yeah? Exactly. It's about finding the right person. It's not about making life easier for the police, and it's not just about satisfying the victim and the community they live in. We need to make sure that the person we're going to arrest is hopefully the right person. And that will be done by interviewing, arresting, collating of all the evidence. And the very, very last point there is present findings to the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service are our representatives in a court to make sure that we present the correct evidence, independent evidence. So it's not just about making sure the evidence fits what we would like it to fit, it's about making sure that the truth's found. So that's what we're there for with regard to the police. Now, we've talked about the crime. There's some people here that would maybe attend a crime or be involved in an investigation. You've got a senior investigating officer. You love murders, obviously that's quite apparent. If there's a serious crime like murder, it's a very, very complicated and complex inquiry for most of the time. So there will be nominated what's called a senior investigating officer. And that's the officer you see on the TV who does all the briefings and the one who makes all the decisions. And it's that person's responsibility to make sure that the investigation goes the right way. The exhibits officer, you may think is, well, that's maybe not such an important role. But as Alan said before, can be cleared massive amounts of evidence and massive amount of exhibits. We need to make sure that we know who they've been recovered from, that there's no contamination, and we do the right thing with them. Anybody think what a pulsar could be? You can have that full bag of sweets, and we can just think what a pulsar is. Yeah? It can be, but not in this context. Nearly though. I thought I was going to panic and have to give all those sweets away. At the back.
It's a police officer that is around the scene. If you see something that you think is suspicious around the scene, you've got to report it back.
Nearly. Quite often for a scene, whether it's murder, whether it's a vehicle crime, whatever, there may well be evidence that's been dropped either to or from the scene. We employ specialists in searching, and what POLIS actually stands for is Police Search Advisor. So this person would be responsible for making sure that everything around the scene is searched correctly. Now, it's not just about the police, it's not just about uniformed officers and detectives like myself. You have a huge support network there. The scientific support manager is what I actually do, and that's a person who's responsible for all the forensic side of business. Crime scene manager would be in charge of the actual scene, and anything that needs to go to Alan in the lab would have to go through a decision-making process, and that's what we'd have a forensic submissions officer for. Can anybody think of anybody else that might be involved in an investigation? Yeah? Yeah. And what support do you think that the police should give the victim's family? Yeah. Brilliant. Well done. You've actually, in fact, come down here for a bag of sweets because that's a really, really important part. What people tend to forget, they like the sort of the very interesting, exciting bit about police chasing criminals and putting people in front of the court. What people tend to forget is that there's a victim and there's a victim's family. And can you imagine how you would all feel if one of your relatives had been hurt or had some property stolen? They need support, and as does where you live, because if you've had a number of burglaries in your area, then it makes people feel a little bit unsafe, doesn't it? So there's a lot of police involved in actually supporting the victim, and I think that's such a really good point, that we need to make sure that the victim's family and people who live nearby are actually looked after. Right, another question. What is a crime scene examination? So if you all use your buzzers. Quickly. Yeah. I'm going to skip over the court stuff. Sorry, man, I've gone.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. I'll just skip over. All right. Yeah. Okay. So it's been quite split between 1 and 3. And in fairness, you know, 1 and 3 are as correct as each other almost, but 1 is there you go, well done. It's all about the recovery. It's not about deciding what goes to the laboratory and what is going to be used in evidence. It's their responsibility to make sure that they collect all possible evidence, and then it'll be dependent on somebody like myself and the other investigators to decide on what should be submitted to a laboratory, so Alan in his past life can do all the analysis for. Just very, very quickly, for those who maybe in the future want to become a CSI. As you can see, it's all about the recovering and recording of exhibits and evidence. If you think about it, then actually education-wise, which is obviously very, very important, then most will have to have A-levels and go for a degree, although certain police forces do employ people direct, but it's always best if you have got some kind of education behind you. As I said, in the job responsibilities, it can range from the murder, which everybody seems to be the most keen about, but don't forget that every single crime there'll be evidence there. So even when it comes to theft from vehicles or theft from a shop, then a crime scene officer may attend. And the skills, then photography. Why do you think photography is important? At the back? Well done, excellent, exactly right. Photography is so, so important, and that has never changed from years ago when we first started collecting forensic evidence until today. A picture paints 1,000 words, as you've all probably already heard. You'll also have to do fingerprint, tool, we mentioned footwear, how important footwear is, and making sure that the evidence is actually ready for analysis without any opportunity for contamination. I'm going to very, very quickly go through this because there's a little sort of exercise at the end that Alan would like everybody involved with. You heard me say before about the Crown Prosecution Service. The Crown Prosecution Service represents the public, not just the police, in prosecuting offences at a Crown Court. And their responsibility is to make sure that they present all the evidence. It's not just evidence that suits the prosecution, it's to make sure that they present all the evidence, whether that's for or against the person that's in front of the court, to make sure there's a fair trial, and that's so, so important. In courts, where after all the work from the police officers, from all the work of the forensic teams, from all the work from the scientists, if there's a case to answer against somebody who's been responsible for the murder or for the burglary or whatever, then it will go to one of the court, either magistrate's court or Crown Court, depending on the seriousness of the offence. I'm going to cut that a little bit short because I know, Alan, you want to move on a little bit. So I apologise for that was a little bit quick at the end. There you go, mate.
Yeah, I just like the sound of my own voice. I'm just itching to get back up. Okay, so crime types. What sorts of crime types could there be? It's wide-ranging. It could range from the burglary right through, and we'll use the example of your murder to then think about, well, what sort of evidence would you be thinking about? Now, we've heard about blood, we've heard about fibres, but what you've got to think about is, what is that actual evidence? What is it going to tell you? What's it going to do? We can have physical evidence, so the likes of, if somebody was drink driving, then it's a criminal offence to drink alcohol and drive. So if we find alcohol in a driver's blood, then that is physical evidence intrinsic to that act. We could have physical evidence that arises as a consequence of the physical act. So a fingerprint left at a burglary, absolutely. Or if we've got in a car hitting another car, then you're going to get transfer. Every contact leaves a trace, paint onto paint. You're going to get that transfer coming in. And this new one, and this is coming in more and more these days with the likes of digital evidence from the e-crime aspects, or looking at information you can get from your mobile phones, information you can get from your PCs, from your laptops, from your iPads, from your phablets and so on. So we think about what evidence is, and we'll put it into the context of the murder side of things. Then it's going to include your body fluids, which we've found out, yes, we're going to be looking predominantly at blood, but what else? There could be saliva there, could also be urine in there, could also be feces in there as well. All the lovely stuff that comes out of us. So what we're looking for predominantly on that is looking for your DNA. Okay, and looking to try and find an individual based on their genetic information. We've also got the classification of trace, which is your paint, your glass, your fibres. Talked about fibres as in you sat down in the seats, then fibres are going to transfer onto you, and your fibres are going to transfer onto the seat as well. My stuff, the drugs, so looking at whether or not there's tablets, powders, what they are, or what happens when somebody ingests those. And likewise as well, Gordon's mentioned about your fingerprints and also your footwear, which is so important. But then it's also going to cover any other marks. So if somebody has broken into a property, did they use something to break into that window? In which case, could you identify what was used based on their tool marks? So, that being said, what we're going to do for the next few minutes is I'm going to show you a case. It's not a murder case, sorry. No, it says. But what it is this one. Okay, so, but before we do, and as well I'm collecting these, you can read this stuff up on screen. One of the things which is really important about evidence is, yes, we identify that it's at the scene, and this is what you've got to be thinking about, or what sort of evidence would I expect to find. But once you identify it at the scene, then how are you going to protect it? And one of the ways that we can protect it is using bags, funnily enough. So, what's that? Nah. What type of bag? I want to put this up. It's a brown paper bag. Okay, so, what do you think you would use that for? Shopping. What do you would use it for? Shopping. Okay. So if we find an item, say we find, oh, I don't know, how about this lovely jumper? This is it a lovely jumper? Do I suit it? I'm not sure. Is it my colour? Okay. So we find this. But we find this and it has been raining outside. It's wet. So, are you going to put it into this? No. What's going to happen? Just we'll get rid of that. Don't want it. Okay. So, what are you going to put this in? You found it at the scene. So what are you going to do? could we put it into one of these? A plastic bag. Okay, so yes, we could, but it's wet. Okay, so if we seal that, okay, and take it and transport it, give it to our exhibits officer that Gordon has mentioned, and he pops it on the shelf and leaves it in the storeroom, what's going to happen to it? Still going to get wet, and if there's any little bugs on here, then what we're going to get is we're going to get some fungus growing. Okay, and if we get fungus growing, and we've got blood on here as well, what's going to happen to that blood? It's just going to get contaminated, in which case we're not going to be able to do anything with it. So yes, it will go into this bag firstly, but this bag will go back to the stores and it will be left, and this will dry. Okay, it will then get moved into one of these. Okay, so the bags come in all shapes and sizes. I could almost fit in that one. In fact, probably some of you could. So they would all go into here. And again, contamination-wise, so important. What do? We're going to seal this. How do we seal this? We can seal this quite easily with some brown tape, brown parcel tape. So what we would do to protect it is we'd pull down the top once, but we pulled it down again twice. Okay? So now that seal is up here. And then we will take that brown tape and we will go down this side and all along here and down this side, and then we will sign across that to say that we've put that seal in this bag. And then we'd fill lots of details up on here to identify that we've collected it from that particular location. So, if we're looking at our case, and this case is this one, can't believe you wanted a murder. Okay, so what we do have, we have up-and-coming artist is Thomas Brown. He's had his artwork cut out from a frame. This is his artwork here. You heard of an artist called Banksy? Yes. Well, Thomas Brown is the Geordie equivalent of Banksy. Yeah, kind of. But he will be in the future. So this piece of artwork, this is the artwork which has been stolen, and you can see it. Would you pay £10,000 for that? Who's got £10,000? Because I could. So this is the one that's been stolen. So the police have been informed. The likes of Gordon will have sorted out who's going to come out to the scene and what sort of things are going to be collected. So during his investigations, we've identified that one particular individual, Betty Primrose, is the prime suspect. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a virtual tour of this location. So, okay, so where we are is, anybody recognize that building? Civic Centre. Okay, so just behind the Civic Centre, all the way around here, is Squires Building, which has got our art gallery in it. So we can see we've got some cordon tape off, so nobody can come in apart from us. So we're going to go in and have a little bit of a closer look. So, what can you see on the ground there? So, some little bits of red card. We have a little bit of a closer look to there. You see anything else? Should we have a look at that one, or should we have a look at this one? This one. Okay. So, okay. What do you think that is? Okay. Do you think that's going to be important? And this is one of the things that we want you to think about for the quizzing, is trying to identify what you think is going to be important. What you would package it in. So thinking about that contamination issue. And also thinking about what information is that going to give us. Okay. Is it going to be important or not? Okay. So let's go a little bit closer in now. So if we go into the main gallery, and I'll quickly skip round here, and this is the entrance to the gallery here. So if we have a look around this one, nice artwork all the way around. Oh, That's a tank, yeah. Okay. Oh, and what is missing? And what is missing is our picture. This is the frame that has been cut out from. So, if we have a little bit of a closer look at this frame, then what else can you see? There's a bit of a, this is one of the things that you don't see this on CSI. Look, there's an arrow pointing, there's a clue. Okay, if we go in and have a look, Betty, I don't think, was a particularly good criminal because she's used a normal kitchen knife to cut out the print. But this is a really, really sharp knife. Okay, trust me. Okay, so we have a knife which is found there. Would you want to collect that? What do you think you would collect that in? If you put it in a plastic bag, a knife is very sharp, what's going to happen? It's going to come straight through. So, what you can do is you can pop it in one of these, which is a little plastic cylinder which opens up. It's called a sharps tube, and it will protect. So no sharps can come through here. What's going to happen to that? Pop it into a bag. Okay. So, would you do anything with the wooden frame? Okay. I'm going to leave that as an open-ended question. I'm not going to ask you why or what you would do with it, or what evidence could be on there. That's part of your quiz. Okay. Can you see anything else? There's a door. Okay. If I go back onto the door, the only reason why I'm putting that in is it takes you back out of the doorway. But is there anything, or do you think there would be any evidence which would be found on that doorway? Don't tell me. Put it down on your quizzes. Okay. If we have a little bit of a closer look, we'll get a little bit closer as well. And we'll go even closer. What is that? Okay, would you do anything with that? Would you put your hand up and say, that's my phone? Okay, so again, what we'd do is we'd have a look at that. Okay, so, in terms of this investigation, okay, what I want you to consider, and this is forming part of your quiz here, is think about all the evidence based on the burglary in the surroundings, what sorts of things you should be looking for. How would you package them to prevent contamination? And also, what information is that going to give you? Okay, so that's going to form part of your quiz. Who's coming back tomorrow? Marvellous. At least you're admitting that you're coming back and I've not scared you off. Excellent. Well, tomorrow what we're going to be looking at is the digital evidence, i.e. the mobile phone, and also looking at fingerprints themselves. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about those as well. So, and then you get some more questions tomorrow. You get homework. Isn't that great? In terms of this exercise, that's probably us. I think we've kind of like run out of time. So hopefully it's been informative. Hopefully it's told you a little bit more about forensic science and sort of putting things into context, certainly in the roles that the police play as well as the scientists and their support staff team. And also starting to think about, well, it's not quite as easy as they make out and not quite as glamorous as they make out on TV. So thank you for your attention. A round of applause for all our lovely volunteers and everybody who